about Spring Boot and how to create RESTful APIs with Spring Boot, how to handle errors and some validations, testing and deployment, monitoring with the Spring Boot Actuator, and some of the best practices, and as a kind of and last but not least, talk about a little bit of Spring design patterns that are applying in Spring. Okay, I'm not going to give completely full detail about REST, but I think this picture gives a lot of details what it is REST. And if you are interested in more details, there is a presentation that was given by Madura, and you can see also in this link where it was a reference from Eleonora. Basically, the REST API is about to create a request and send it to a server and send a response back. There is the contract, or you can define, usually is in the JSON format. You have a base URL, you have some path variables and query parameters. The nice thing is we have HTTP methods where you rely, which are the get, host, put, and delete. And many of status code where they are defining different types of groups. Success could be in the family of 200. Those are the two most, or the three most common, I would say, 200, 201, and 204, and redirection, and client error, and server error, if it is a 500. But again, if you want to know a bit more, I think this image brings everything about REST. And now let's go about Spring Boot. Spring, it's a very big framework where many things can happen. And here is kind of an overview of the features that Spring can provide, or what you can work for: microservice, reactive, cloud, and the web apps, and batches, event-driven, and serverless. But the whole big reason for Spring for developers for Java, because it's the one that makes our development quicker, easier, and very safe. When basically we can, with a very small minimal change, you can create and achieve many things that Spring already gives you for free without reinventing and make you more productive. And yes, it is one of the most popular Java framework. Those are the top features regarding the Spring Boot. For us, regarding REST, I think that's very important: the Spring application, lazy initialization, security logging, caching, and Kotlin support for the ones that are also interested in Kotlin, which is also an amazing language. Validation, JSON, and testing. For me, testing is also amazing reason for Spring Boot. But also there is a part for scheduler and task execution, which also is quite powerful. So when you're thinking about implementing or to create your REST API, you have to consider many things. You can do everything on your own, but there are many libraries and frameworks that support you and give you many things, for example, for logging, for security. Then you just need to import a library, and then it's there already available for you just to use. If you want to start with Spring, the first thing is just go to Start Spring.io. They provide already for you a way to create projects in many ways with different versions. If you want to use dependency, it's very popular Maven, but nowadays it's more used Gradle and with Kotlin DSL. And you can even use Java, and you can change different versions of Java. From the dependencies, you can see there are many options. Like for the scope of this presentation, we are going to start with the Spring Web. The small part, like when you can create that, when I'm going to this link now. Okay, so here is basically what you are going to do. They just create and go to the web and click in generate. When you here, like you can change, for example, if I want to do with 22, but I will keep for the presentation today the 21 version with Kotlin DSL. And just press generate. You're going to basically just download and put everything, and you can unpack that. Basically, your project is going to start like this. If you unzip the folder, you are going to have an application that it's going to start, and application.properties. One thing I tend to change is to prefer to use YAML, but that's my preference. You can do with different things for sure. So here, I'll just adjust this a little bit. And for that. Okay. Yes, so let's start the application. When you have, here I'm using IntelliJ, and basically you can use Eclipse or any other thing, but IntelliJ is quite nice. You can just refresh dependencies, and here it has already everything, and I can just, from the application directly, we can start the application. So far, I didn't code, I didn't change anything besides my favorite YAML configuration, and you have already your Spring Boot running. That's it for your setup, nothing more than that. Also, what is important to mention, at least for the presentation, is that I'm going to use Gradle. When we talk about Spring, we are talking about many libraries and tools that support us to build what we needed. For REST API, that's the library we are going to use, which is the Spring Boot Start Web. This one is for testing, and is also for support with JUnit test. Now, coming back to the presentation, where I am. Down here. Okay. So going back here, when we talk about now to create our first REST API, what we need to do in Spring? Just basically, we need to create a controller class, implement, add those annotations regarding REST controller, and then Spring creates the API for you. And this is just make us developer quicker and easy, and take care what is really important for us, which is the business logic. And if we can go now to IntelliJ here, and what I'm going to do, we can just create Java class, which is going to be controller, and is controller user, or in that case, user controller, sorry. And I'm going just to speed up a little bit. I have it already on some code prep. I'm going to create now a domain, which is going to be models. There's domain, and create a user record. And for that, in this case, as I'm using Java 21, I guess I'm not going into details about the record, but this is just a simple class for old versions, and I don't need to implement gets and setter. Everything is already available for me for free from the Java. This is not Spring. And when I'm in a controller again, so I just need to import my user. And here, just to have some data, I'm creating some user, and I'm creating the API. And let's try that out. Just restarting the application, and now if I'm going to here, let's see. Ooh, not working. That's good, right? Listening. Okay, let me see. It's working right here. is user. Too many screens. What I'm doing wrong. Okay, stop this and start application, my controller, REST API. Sorry, guys. That should be it. Okay. Let me see. I have another project, but just a second. Sorry. Okay. That's why I should play with only one ID. Okay, yeah, but that's my other project doing the work. Okay, but let's continue like that for now. Okay, so this is what I want to show here when we are using Spring is that you have your get API, and then based on doing your request mapping, you define the contract of your own API, and you can also add, for example, other methods. The one that it's very common as well, it is the post mapping for creating or to updating a module. You also can have another example is like this. You have your get mapping, and you can use as a path parameter, and doing that, basically you can access the API. But coming back to the presentation here, so you have the get, post, put, and delete for free for your presentation, for your application, sorry. And you have the delete for the path variable. I think it's like you just get user or customer and the parameter, and you could use also the response entity, and in that case it's basically you can already associate to a status code. For example, for in this example here, I'm returning just the user, but if you use the response entity, which is basically this response entity returns to you status code and encapsulate your own module there. And if there is another, in that case, for example, I am just comparing and taking the list of users, and if the user doesn't exist, I return a not found. This is done in the controller, but basically there is many ways you can handle that. I will talk a little bit about exception handling later, but this is one way. And the response entity is part of the SpringBoot framework, and gives you a lot of power in case of status codes and managing for you the domain of this. But as you can see in the response, it returns a JSON and converts your Java entity into a JSON module and return in the response. Now, if we look now about the other, oops. Okay, so another thing that we can have is use and not just by define the contract via the API, but use the Open API and Swagger to document your APIs. In that case, for example, we can use Open API specification, and by including in your project, you can have available all the APIs you have it and documented. Even you can test your own REST API via Swagger. And Swagger is following all the standards for Open API, where you can interactly on an easy way without doing much effort, using annotations as string and generate the whole documentation for your test. For example, here you can see the products and you can add all of that. In the setup of the project, basically you have, let me just switch into this thing. Can you see well, Sonali? Yes, okay, good. So what I want to show is that if you go to here, you just need to add the Open API library. And then by doing that, you also have the application. Where is it? Okay, let me go to. Okay. Oops. Okay, so if I'm going here, we have in the sorry. So that was the one. Did I do? Okay, the demo does not want to work today. Sorry. But basically, I can generate it. Let me just see if I can run the API from here. Okay. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, guys. Ah. I don't know what I did, but I messed up my project. Okay, let's continue then. No magic. Okay, so basically what it can happen here, you have the documentation, and then if you go inside of the API, you have the option of tryout, and then you can see what is the template, and you can execute by that. If, for example, now here, what you need to do, as I was trying to show, you need this OpenAPI Gradle plugin, and you also need this implementation to Web MVC UI for the OpenAPI. You adding tags, which are the part to build the documentation. So you just add APIs for product, and here you have a method which just add the operation description, and that's what you are going to see here. When you see the API description, you have API for products, for example, and inside of the method, when you add the documentation, it says API for product, for example, here. But also, not only that, you can add extra reference for the documentation saying the types of response you can have in your application. For example, if it's a 200, it's a success, the product was updated. If it's a 404, means that the product was not found. And you can add the documentation as much as you need, which is really helpful for anyone that's going to consume your API. You keep the contract very reliable, and then people can test, and you can see that everything is working on just by using those annotations and coming directly from these API. When you go to the Swagger UI, you are going to see basically this example where you have the status code, and then you can see the two examples as well. Okay, now going a little bit more in details. When I mentioned that we are using, for example, Java domains in the project here. Let me just go back here to the project. So we are using users, and in that case, for example, you can add annotations, and you can also do the serialization and deserialization from your Java Podio to the way that the REST API can understand. In that case, is Jackson. Jackson is one of the most popular libraries for Java nowadays, and you can use for do the serialization, because it's not recommended for you to use serialization from the Java itself. And then here you can just basically add some also notations. So that's kind of SpringBoot is all about annotations. You can add, ignore some attribute. For example, let's say you add internally in your domain, you would like to call as an ID, but in your API, someone else is requesting to be user ID. So you just add that, and then in a way you can separate it a little bit, your expose class from your domain class. In this example here, I have the JSON naming, where we know that we can have snake case, which is this example here with underscore. That's very traditional, but you can also have the upper, I'm going to go here, which is the lower camel case. And then you would see like as more similar to Java style, but this is kind of an agreement from the back end with the front end, how style you can use. This kind of is supported in the both ways by Jackson, just by configuration. And this can be done in many ways. You can do by the domain class, in that case, user here. And if you are having multiple APIs, one can have snake case, the other can have camel case, and that's flexibility you have from Jackson. Here is the example where you can use the SpringBoot default configuration, where you can actually define for all your APIs already the way you want to handle. In this case, I'm saying that include non-null objects, which means if you have an object that is null, we are not going to send in the response. And then this makes you reduce the traffic of the data. But let's say for you, you want always to have all attributes there, even though they are null. You can exclude that configuration, because that's the configuration from default, by default. And Jackson, as I mentioned here, this comes from, it comes already by default in our in SpringBoot. Only if you need extra configuration or more fancy conversion, then you need extra libraries. But for now, it's like the basic things, all that I'm showing here is already available from Spring Boot directly. And let me just show a little bit on the configuration. Basically, in Spring, you have a way, in this case, it's use the bean to initialize globally into your Spring Boot application, and using the kind of the core of Spring Boot, which is the dependency injection, and also to have the basically the whole idea how you initialize modules. We are using the bean for that. And in this case is how we say, okay, if you have an object mapper, and this is part of the Jackson configuration, and you can see here from the library, in this case, you can just say, okay, actually, in this is an advanced example where I want to basically say to Jackson to configure for me a serialize the Java time in a different way that's not the default. In this example I have here, actually, I'm using the faster XML. This is the Jackson data bind. But if I don't need to do that, you don't need the library. And that's actually, you can see here in the Jackson data binding. And in this case, it's just to do serialization for the Java new version of Java in that case. Now going to the product, you can add a JSON property to rename the attribute, or you can even also add, in that case, ignore an attribute. And in that case, if you look here in the response, the one that works, we don't see the full name user because it's not shown here. No, Swagger UI is in the same port, actually. I know what it is. Aha. No. No. Okay. We will manage until there. I don't want you to be stuck looking for me to debug the code, but maybe we can try in the end. Okay. Okay, so this is how the fancy about Jackson and how you can make changes globally or in specific into your model. Now, going to a very important part of the Spring is the error handling. There is many ways you can do. The first one I show you for you before is that you can actually do the checking, and then you can do like gracefully to handle the exception. And in this case here, there is this REST controller device, which globally would all the exceptions are going to pass here. And then you can customize from each exception what you want to happen. For example, here I'm saying if I have an exception called product not found, and also I have another special exception, this no such element exception, I want all of these group of exceptions return a status code not found. And not only by that, I also want to customize the message, and I generated an error detail message, or in that case, you can create your own service customized module, and then you can add more information, more details. Sometimes in that case, I think that would work here. Let me see, exception. So I created this duplicated exception, and when we are in the global handler exception, we have it here. In this case, we have the error detail, which has a status, message, and details. And for all cases, we have it here. I think for this first example, what I wanted to show is you have a not found exception, but you could have internal error exception, or in this case, for example, I'm looking for a product that has, I'm looking, let me show the controller here in the service. Okay, so when I'm creating a product, the first thing you should check, or let's say in this case, I'm checking if this product does not exist, or in this case, if the ID is already there. And if it exists, then I cannot say it, and I'm throwing that exception. And for that, this is an exception that we are expecting, and it's way better that when you are expecting an exception, or you want to handle that in a different way, then basically you can do that. In this case, is usually defined as a bad request because the information that the user is sending is invalid, and then he has to do something else. And then the front end can know how to do that properly. But also, if it's regarding validation, which I'm going to show a little bit later, then you can do that. Here in the user, for example, in the user controller, we have done basically that, right? So we have looking for, where is it? I changed the code here. But the idea is like, let's say if you have the product controller, you check product by ID. Okay, for example, here I have I'm looking for a product, and let's say if you search for an ID that doesn't exist, you can either return a no and say, okay, that doesn't exist is no. But you could also customize and create your own exception saying product not found, and going back to your global exception, then you could just come to this section where saying it's not found, everything is going to return a 404 in that case, a not found exception. So that's kind of you couple the handling of the exceptions, and then every exceptions they are going to pass in this place. If you could even create a global exception that you can just say in that case, for example, for this is internal error because you don't know what exactly happened, but at least you can give extra log, stack trace, or something like that that could support your handling of the exception. So you can do either that in the controller or in the service, but considering these are kind of related to your business, it's also good that you, I would say in my experience, that you do that on your service layer, not into your controller layer, which is in this case is in your API. So your API just should call and do the request, but in your business, then it's part of your service to take care of it. Let's check the presentation. Okay.
Adriana?
Yes.
Patrick noticed that maybe you have the wrong port after the local host. Is it possible? Not 8080, but 8088 or something like that.
I don't think
no,
so.
Personally, you have changed that, I think.
Okay, let me go back here. You mean this?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it
looks correct, I think.
It looks correct.
Because when we using Swagger API, I think that actually since we are here, and I think I know what's happening, and I from the presentation I added in the slide, but it looks like I go back from here. Okay, where is it? Okay, I thought that I added on that, but I have in my other project. It's missing the annotation in the YAML actually, because for some reason I lost my YAML, and maybe actually that's the problem. I renamed that, right? YAML or YAML, but I think I'm going to just open our own. So maybe we have our own project And let me show something. In case I think that's true, and that's what we are missing here. So you can add the library, but if you don't add the configuration, then I think it doesn't end up there. Okay, so what? And here is again. Okay, so in this case here, I'm going to add API v1, I think that's what we're just.
Yeah, I think you need to restart as well.
Yes, it could be anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so let's restart.
Application name.
Application, we can use WCC, right? A demo.
It is checking from your Gradle. Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Not started.
Not starting, but it's I just wanted to see. I am in the right path, okay, and in the test, okay. But I was looking in the Actuator because I did actually don't check out. Let me just. Looks like I'm too nervous and I'm forgetting what to do. It okay, close all tabs, and I have Actuator here, which it's another thing that I'm going to show later. But Spring Doc Actuator, okay, so just see if. But he's not happy with me today. Come on. Maybe you share your screen, Adriana, because it was working before, not anymore. Okay.
When I check out from main or from demo tests, both are working.
Yeah, I was in the demo test before, but now in the main.
Main is working.
Yeah, I should be in only one branch, but I wanted to show in small details. So we are learning. I hope. I am learning a lot. Okay, but never mind. I think I still I will prepare version 2 more ready and posting in the repository, everything working. But you can see from the screenshots that it's here. So I just want to not fill you with more time. Okay, so now going into the extra details regarding Spring. As we showed before, there is the bean annotation, and I just want to give you an overview regarding the annotation. So when you are using bean, basically we are explicitly saying to Spring, to the application context, to initialize that module. And if you know about a singleton, basically you are saying to your application, start this instance, in that case of object mapper, for your application one time. So you don't create many instances of your own application, and that's really good for performance and also helps a lot with the dependency injections for, that's kind of the whole, let's say the heart of SpringBoot is to initialize all the class that you don't need to create, and you don't need to import and pass all the parameters as we are doing, for example, for the user. When I'm creating a user here in the module, here, let me just screen it a little bit. So let's say here in the controller, we have done that. So I am as a developer, I have to initialize this instance of a user, right? But here is just for the sake of the demonstration. But when I want to initialize my controller and my configuration of my application, in this case, the dependencies, I don't need to initialize more than once. And the Beam is doing that work for us. And that's kind of the small part of your instance of your object or your controller or your service. And when we are, this is basically helping for the dependency injections, and then your application can scan and can resolve for you automatically, no work extra for you. The other annotation, which you will see a lot in the Spring, is about component. So in this case, a component, which I didn't update in the screenshot, but a component here would be, let's say you have a util class. It's not, you want to, for example, format, let's say, dates, and you want to create a util dates, and you can just say this is a component, and then it's going to be created as a singleton as well, but it's just a small thing. It's not kind of too much, and this is about a component. So that's why you could use this tag, and that's also going to be created as a bean, and it's going to understand this specialization of a bean and the service and the controller here. Because you saw already, we use a service, but there is a controller annotation where you can, basically is a more specialized level of a component. And here, when I'm talking about service, remember, not update the screenshots. Okay. So for the part of the service, I think now I can go to the code here. In my service, basically, it's the service is the one that you should get your business. So this is a specialized component for your business. So in this case, we could be considering this product component, but for us, the service is the one responsible for the business logic of your application. You can have product, you can have user, you can have many things. In this case, the service you should use to indicate this is a business. This is your controller for your business. When we talk in this case about controller, I'm talking about basically in the REST controller. And then it's what you are seeing that basically the controller is a type of a bean or a type of component, and that's the only difference. In this case, is using the HTTP or the SpringBoot HTTP, the web library. But that's kind of a bit of a difference. But coming to the service again, so it's like you have your business logic, you can use or you should use your service. Okay, let's see if we can have, okay, sorry, the tag you asked here, that's part of to the Open API documentation. So for some reason, let me see here. I have the Open API and I have the Open API management. Let me refresh here. And but I will go to the test, at least demo test. This one was the latest one that I was working, and it was working well. Let me refresh here. So sorry for the confusion, really. But again, so the operation that you asked, I think I saw here, it's regarding to the Swagger, the library one that I was working on. And I don't know what's the reload. Okay. And yes, so let me try one more time. And application, all the time is missing that. Okay, but from the test part, what I want to show is a little bit of what are the type of tests that you can have in your application. For me, I can consider three types of tests you can use for your REST. I think test is kind of you can have many different ways of explaining. But what I want to say, we should have a unit test, we can have a component test, and we can have integration test, and then we can have end-to-end test. What I would start from is you can have in that, not this one, product controller. A unit test is like the small unit of the code that you can test. In that case, you can have a product and a product class. For example, this is a unit, but in this case, you don't have much to test. But when you are in the controller of your, not in the controller, sorry, into the service, for example, in this service, you have, this is a class, right? You can test just this method. And if you are testing just this method without any interference from the outside world, it means you are doing unit test. And that's like when you are going with, in the test here, when, sorry, we have here service test. Okay, so let's say we create this unit test and we just set up the test, and when you just want to run and see all products. In this case, we are just saying, okay, you have this product, and in your service, which is in this class, I'm just returning a list of product, which is empty. And you could monkey the test, or you could just return. In this case, it's just checking, okay, I'm getting all the products, it's not new, and it's empty. But if you go for the next one, like, okay, I want to create a new product. What is the logic here? I'm checking if the product exists. If it doesn't exist, then I add it. And that's what are the case you can test here? Basically, I can test, okay, when there is a case when a product already exists, should it throw an exception? When there is a case that does not exist, and add it here. So at least two cases you have to test it here as a small unit. And that's what is going to be happening here. You create a new product, and the product is, you do assertions about the product, and you know that in the end you check all products, they are, you contain the list. I mean, in this case, originally I wouldn't do as part of this, but it's like as one thing I learned by testing is like, if you use your own code to test your code, it makes safer. So that's kind of the idea here. You test in the create method, but you are also using the get all methods to test. And then go here, okay, you can test the throw exception part and so on. So here are a lot of examples where you can do that. And you just run, let's hope it works. And then you say here, everything is working fine. Now, if we think about, okay, the other option of test is when, it's for me, I consider a component test, which is when you have your own service and you have your controller. In this case, for example, I have my service. If I want to test this service working together with the controller, which is the product controller. So here I'm saying, okay, I'm depending on the service tool to the controller. So this is a combination of both things. Some people could just say this is still a unit, but it could also evolve to be a component. But in this case, if I'm using a mock, I would call also as a unit test. But here, let's go with the example. Names is irrelevant in that case, but I would just say it's better just to know how to do that. In the controller test of the product, then what you can do, Spring gives you this web MVC test where you are testing your own controller. You can auto-wired. This auto-wired is just to inject automatically from Spring, and then you can know the same as we do in the source code. And then you can use, in this case, I'm using Mockito, which is also part of the requirements when you are testing. You can, this is the most common library to use and to test Java. And when you go here, then, okay, I'm auto-wiring the object mapper. So in this case, I'm combining part of the modules, the Jackson, the mock of the MVC, and my service. And for me, the reason of combining those three is not a unit, it's actually a component. That's why I'm saying that. But here, then you say, okay, when I'm set up, I'm creating just some product, and then you can say, okay, if I'm mocking the service when I request for all products to return here the list of products. And then you can basically do the task to check this and see if it's returning stack state okay, and it is returning your same data that you just mocked. And that's kind of the thing. Here, when you go, for example, for the user controller test, it's basically the same thing. It's using the MVC test, and then here you are injecting some user, and then you say, okay, if I want to get all users, I'm just mocking that user and then returning here, and I'm checking the data, all the data. Here you can go crazy and do all the exceptions as you need, but this is kind of the success and the failure case. Here for creating a user, and like that's the whole idea. This is part of what you can do with Spring. You can even assert just the status or the content. That's up to you. Okay, so let's just see if it's working. No pressure. Okay, so good, it's working. Okay, let's see now the other case, which I want to say is when you are testing about integration test. When you start your, when we just create this repository from the Spring.io, it's already generated this one for us. And this is an integration test. Why? Because basically we are starting the Spring Boot, and then we are making sure the application is starting. And this is an integration because basically we actually have to kind of use Spring container for the test, and then you install, and then let's say if you create something wrong in the setup, it wouldn't start. So that's a very dummy and simple one when you are using actually Spring Boot test for that. But if we are actually want to test, not this one, in the integration test, you can do, for example, in this case is for product, we can use a Spring Boot test. And usually integration tests, they are slow because they actually, you have to start everything that is a dependency for you. And then in this case, I'm just injecting the controller and just say, okay, I want to get all the products and it should return at 200 and have no product, for example. And the same go, for example, if you are looking for a product one, and so in doing that. And here, when I'm running that, you can see different from unit test, which runs in milliseconds. Actually, the integration test in this case is running like in 400 milliseconds. But if I have to start a database, for example, and then to test, inject some data, that's why kind of integration test is so slow. But Springs provides you all of that by the Spring container. In this other example here, it's basically the same thing, but it's just to know that you can do that. In this case, you are sure, for example, if you are changing your API that is starting, that you are getting the user's information or not. For example, the user we are injecting directly, and then you are actually make sure that all components from the beginning and to the end, you have all of them there. Okay, so going back, let me go to the presentation for the test. So unit test, component test, integration test. Okay, now is the part for SpringBoot Actuator. What it is, basically when you create your SpringBoot by default, or it's available from Spring that you can monitor your application, and they provide already some endpoints for you to use. And basically you can import this dependency, which is the SpringBoot starter for Actuator. And in your application, then you say, okay, I want to show the endpoint always, and I want to include these endpoints, but you can include all of them. In this case, I just gave some example of the ones that would be nice to add. And this can provide you the health check of your application. Let's say if you are depending on the database and you want to check if your database is up, then this is part of the endpoints that you can use, and you can customize to throw you some information. In other things also, you can have a properties configuration environment variable. Let's say you are deploying to your own development, but you changing some environment variables, you want to see what it is. This is available and provided by Actuator that you can even change without doing a redeploy. So this is kind of very powerful. And in that case, okay, I think I have at least one endpoint here I want to show, which was the store from before. Okay, for example, for the health check, you just go to Actuator health check, and then you could have this part where basically say, okay, my disk is up, I have this space where there's a store and it's working, and the last time I pinged it was up. This is the responsible. But also you can have metrics. In this case, this is a metric that I guess for everybody that is in the world of JVM, memory is very important. So always we are concerned how much memory you are using. And in this case, we have the metric, and there is a key for the metric. This is already provided by Spring, the JVM memory used. And here you can see the information. Then you could create dashboards to see CPU, memory, and everything that's provided by that. Let me, when I was looking here, let me. So basically, by doing this information, you can check all of that. If it works, your Open API documentation, then you can also expose those via Open API. And here you can see the ones that I expose via configuration, where you can see loggers, metric, the health check, info. And in this one, for example, the environment is the one that I mentioned also, that you can change the configuration, but can have CPU, database, and you can even extend it to add more options there. Okay, when we're thinking about Java and Spring Boot, one thing that's quite important for us to know is the deployment. For Java application, it's very good because basically you can run anywhere. You create a jar and then you run it, which is basically what we are doing here. Using Gradle, you do Gradle clean boot jar. Doing that, you create in the build leads folder, you are going to create a jar with the name of your application. In this screenshot here, you can see that was created as a demo 0 snapshot jar. But just by using Java -jar, you start your own application from anywhere. And that's what you can deploy via command line, or you can deploy with any other tool. But the flexibility for you to run your Java application just by doing that, using the Gradle and using the Spring, it's quite powerful. So you can do that very easy. Okay, going now into design partners. I think I mentioned a little bit about Singleton, but there are many design partners that are used inside of the SpringBoot, and that you can rely on that to know that you can scale your application, that you can have a good maintenance. And in these are kind of the top one that I could identify, just to give some example. But so Singleton is just a one instance. You don't have more than one instance, but you have a proxy adapter template. I'm going to dive in with some examples for that. Here, when you create a service, you are creating a singleton. This is how SpringBoot is doing. When you have, for example, the factor partner, this is very useful for the version of control. And when you can, for example, here, when you are doing a bin, this is using factory partner. For the ones that maybe are not remembering what is factory partner, it's basically, for example, when you have one good example that for me I remember is when you have DAO factory. You can create your DAO interface, and then you can say, hey, actually, I want to use database that's Oracle, or I want to use database that's Postgres. You don't need to rely on which implementation of the database, but basically you can say, if you implement this interface, all types of database can work, and you leave the specific details for that. This is the factory partner. For the template method, Springs provide many templates to support us. For example, the one that you could see is JDBC template and REST template. The JDBC template, for example, you can see here in this example, is that you don't need to implement everything, how to do a query and how to connect and how to do all these logic. There are many of methods already available for you that you can just reuse. The same goes with the REST template or JPI template. Those are like a common implementation that you can just reuse and quickly. For decorator partners, this is kind of a method where you can add, you can create a decorator. In this example here, it's for cache. Basically, you implement a cache, but you don't know in the details what's going to be like, but you can create a cache for users, or you can create a cache for products, and you don't need to know the details for a product or for a user, but the cache just works. That is kind of this decorator pattern. Now, I think I missed some of them for some reason, but what was the other one? The observer. The observer partner is, for example, you can have an interceptor of an event, and you can, when you are creating a user and when you are saving to the database, you can add event listener, for example, to that, and then you can observe that happen without actually interact there, but it's just listening to that. In event-driven development also is kind of how it's using that, but this is also a design partner for that. For proxy, for proxy, you could use, for example, you would have a layer where you are going to log things. So you don't, everything that's happening, you just add the proxy, and then you can log either into S4J, or you can log into log4j. So the proxy actually is also doing for you this logic, and this is kind of another example of the design pattern. Okay, Going back to the best practices, I try to summarize some of the best practices more related to the REST and the Spring. Here is that you should use the methods that we have available: get, post, put, and delete for the exactly case. So if you are actually you want to know the information for a user, using a get. Do not do a post, right? So if you are deleting a user, you can do with a post, but there is a delete method for that. So try to use the methods available to the logic that you want to implement. Use properly the status code. So you have the whole family 200, 400, 500, but rely on those codes to give more information from the outside world, because this is a contract definition. If it's okay, it's returning 200. It was created, it's 201. So rely on and return those status codes according to the use case that you have in your REST API. For the input data, I think I forgot to show that, but I can show a little bit later. But there is a library also for the validation bean, and you can validate your data in the level of, you can validate from your controller, when you can say, okay, if I'm passing a parameter of a user, the user is mandatory. If you pass null, it's going to throw an exception, say, okay, no, user is mandatory, you need that. Or not null, or a size, or an email. Like those are part of the thing it is here. So these are notation for email and for not blank. Those are part of the validation constraints that are available, and you can use from the from here. Validation, SpringBoot starter validation. And when you basically ask for in the controller, you just say, okay, to create a user, the user must be valid. And in that case, you can rely on the Spring for that. You don't need actually to do any extra work, rather than just say, okay, it needs to be valid. And what it needs for the user to be valid, in that case, when come here, to say, okay, the email needs to be defined, cannot be blank, and the username also cannot be blank. And those are the custom message that you can return in case of an error. I think in one of the tasks we can have that, but yeah, you can see it later in the repo. Okay. So this is kind of important. You can do the validation on the controller, but also in the service. If you, in the case, for example, if the user already exists, or if it's mandatory to have a different username, just rely on and validate your data model that you needed. You can use the response entity. I think that's something that I show from the controller, that you can, just by using this entity, you can actually combine the status code, and then you add to the body, and it's kind of a very flexible for you to work in the response. Use the handler gracefully, and pagination filter is also very important when you are doing a REST APIs, to not overload your database or your service with many requests that the user does not need. Use documentation, which today is kind of an amazing topic. But then I think the documentation is really, really important, because you can rely on that with the front end, with your own contract, and what is expected from more friendly way to understand what's happening. Here is also another thing, to not overload your database. You can, for free also, you can have the caching. So in the case of user, if you just add the dependency for cache, and you say the user is cached, so the most common users, or the user itself will be cached, and you can configure for how long itself, so you don't have to reach the database all the time. Another good point, which of course this could be just a simple session, just 1 hour session about security, but Spring also has security protection where you can use by, for example, in this case, you can use the Spring Security Library, and you can use OF or JWT with the token authentication for your API just by creating your config for security using the adapter, and then define that your application needs to be authorized, all your APIs, or you can specify some of them, because maybe the GET ones are not mandatory to be secured, but the put ones or the actuator needs to be authenticated, and you can do that. In conclusion, I would say, okay, Spring Boot, it's very good for REST API. It makes it very friendly for you. The dependency injection is amazing. The validation and error render is very good. You can rely on the design patterns that the Spring is using and make your application more scalable, maintainable. From the best practices, you can make your code more maintainable as well. You can have a good documentation and performance, better performance while using the best tools that Spring has, and Actuator as well. So, like it says, like build fast, maintain effectively, scale confidently with Spring Boot. Yes, now I'm open for questions if you have any. But what I wanted to say is that in our community, we have the project which is called Platform. You can join our Slack. You can check the project source here from the repo. And we are very happy to have more people around. For example, me, Sonali, and Nevena, we are in the Platform backend project. We are implementing the new website and the new platform for the Women Code community. We are using Java, Spring, and all the fun and the latest tools. And we face many issues as I'm seeing today, but it's fun and it's nice to do it together, learn together, and that's what I'm going to say. Questions? Anything that I missed from the chat, ladies, or anyone want to talk? Yes, Alina?
Yeah, I just came late and I didn't saw the beginning, and but I want to just to thank you. I saw that Actuator or from Spring
Actuator.
Actuator, sorry, yeah,
Yes.
and it's very, very interesting thing. What I noticed, you are not using DTOs, and I was having a discussion with someone, and I asked because I don't have experience, like very beginner Java developer, and I was having a discussion, and I was asking why we're using this, why we're not using directly in the implementation. Maybe you, as a senior Java developer with a lot of years of experience, you can explain the benefits, or yeah.
I mean, there is always a pros and cons on everything, right? So I think you could use a data module when you want basically to have a data when you have in your domain, and you can have another module just for your response. And then in this way, you can decouple things. And then basically, if you change something in your domain, you don't affect your API response, for example. Or in this case, what we are doing, we are using the domain class directly to go through the whole system. And for example, for the user, you can have a user and you can store the same user to the database, and you can return the same user into the response. In that case, basically, I think the DTO is the data model transfer, as what you wanted to say. And the domain class.
Sorry, I know it was like, for example, you are using DTOs, but you are using, for example, when you are doing the interface, when you are doing the service, you are using a service interface which will define the methods, and after that you will do a service implementation which will just inherit the methods from the interface. So you are just implement the.
You are talking about the
Yes,
demo here?
yeah,
Because in the demo we are not using
I
interface.
a small confusion. No, it was like for me it was like why we're having in the surface. For example, let's pretend we have. Can you go back to your project?
Yes, just a second. I was in the wrong one, so I'm going to open again.
No, the deal is I understood because it's like you can
yes. So here I'm in the domain.
hide things in which are so some
so
it's regarding security. So for example, if you are just, can you imagine you have a product service interface, and you can have a product service implementation which will implement the interface.
Okay, in that I think here maybe what I can tell you is, let me go to the backend project, because I think what you are asking is not a part of the talk, because I'm not using any interface, at least for service, because service, you don't have a different implementations from the service. So I don't see reasons to actually create interface for service. What we are doing now, for example, when I also talk about database and DAO, and when I talk about DAO Factor, where you have an interface for a DAO that you can have save, update, delete, and then you can create your implementation of that DAO for MySQL. Then you implement that for MySQL, and then in MySQL you do. But let's say you wanted to do for Postgres, then you implement for Postgres, because Postgres is different from MySQL. In that case, there is a reason for you to have an interface. But besides that, for example, what we are doing, let me just see if I have, I can even show from the project itself. Here, it's because right now we at least in that example we are not doing that, but from our backend project we did, for example, if you want to have a repository and we want to do database and we want to do in the file, and then we create a repository, and in the member repository, for example, we have an interface for the member repository where you can say member save and member all. But then when you go to you can have an implementation, which is going to be in a file. In that case, is the file member repository is implementing that, but is an implementation directly. And if I want to have now SurialDB or Postgres, then you just implement the same member repository, but that's it. But for service, no. For service, I think service, they are not a different implementation for you to do it. And when you go here, when you have, for example, configuration of the service, then you say, okay, for the member repository, I want to run from a file, and then I'm going to initialize that one, and then the Spring is going to do that. But I'm not sure if I fully am, because I think that's a bit different. Yes, Sonali, maybe you are
Yeah,
to share more.
Yeah, sometimes I think if your code base is old, so sometimes if you interacting with the database DTO and DAO, you kind of call them as service and service IMPL. So you create your interface name. In the older version of Java, we used to have like interface naming like user service as the interface name, and user service implementation as the implementation class. And this is Spring Boot. It creates a lot of confusion in your head actually, but they are different concepts. You need to understand the concept, but don't go via the name. So naming convention is as developers we decide. And in the older Java version, we used to have service and service IMPLs and something like that in terms of interface and the implementation class. But in context of Spring Boot, service can simply be a service that can fetch the data directly from the database or from any data source, basically.
Yeah, okay. That was my question now, because I'm just using the, as you said, Sonali, thank you for that. I'm using the user service, which in the interface, and I'm using user service implementation, which is I'm defining exactly what the methods are doing from the interface.
Yeah, but I think that's also, if you think about from 10 years ago to now, I think many things change. It was very common that always, if you have a service, you have to first have an interface, then you have to do an implementation for that. That's, I think the code evolved a little bit, but when you are thinking about oriental object, that was kind of the first idea, but then I think nowadays that really depends on the type, the size of the project that you need, the interface, the implementation. And even now you have abstract class and you can have kind of an interface also can implement something. So JVM and Java nowadays is a huge thing, but I think one thing for sure I would say is like depends. That's the best answer I can give you. Depends of the project and the whole idea. You can implement, have an interface that you have only one implementation, then why did you need the interface? It's just to get ready for the future, that the future never comes. So that's also a recommendation, you know. We used to create everything thinking in the future, but sometimes it's just not necessary. So you can start small, but if you look, it is already done for all the other modules, and you have to adapt to that. But here, this example, just at least to have something working that's regarding to the open API here, as I wanted to show. This is something you can use. This is an example from the platform that is currently working, and you have all the APIs that we already implemented. And if you go and just try out and in this case, even we have 2 servers. So you have localhost. Let's just test that because it's easier. And then you can see, okay, this is the core implementation, then this is the actual response from that service. So that's kind of the beauty for us. And you could, of course, just do that and access from here, as we have for user, that's kind of the data. But with Swagger, basically, it's very easier for us to test and to understand the contract. And here, even when you can look, okay, what is the content of the contact page, then you can see, okay, this is this, it's just that. But if you go to the other implementation, then you know, okay, if I try the footer, what is going to return in the footer? And that's kind of, you have your own UI without actually have to build, and you don't need other tools, as you could use Postman for sure, but for external people to see, understand what's happening here, like as you are returning a 200, that can be a 400, 404, and then you know what to expect to your REST API. That's kind of a good thing. And for us, at least here, coming back to the project, that basically you just do by the dependencies. Here we have way more things, but this is just part of the open API that we are using, and here in the application YAML is how we are doing. You can even see here, we don't actually right now expose Actuator, but that could be basically one thing we can do. I wanted to show you that, so we can do. But anyone has any other questions? Because I know this is already late over time, but I definitely would be happy to share more and do way more talking. I'm passionate about the topic, and just sorry that I face many troubles doing my demo. But that's it. Thank you. Sonali, do you want